Hello Internet! This is the Solo Gamer, aka MacCat, and doing something a little different today. As you'll no doubt notice, we've got some big mecha stuff going on because I'm doing a retrospective, well, no, a perspective on the Armored Core series. Specifically, this is Matt's Video Game Perspectives. And what we're discussing here is the Armored Core series. And I'm doing both a view of the most recent games and of the series history. So, let's get this started. It is Armored Core, specifically 4 Answer, and the series in general. And let's get started. Now, for those of you not in the know, the Armored Core series goes back to the early PlayStation era. And it was one of the first times that the PS1 was used for like a real 3D game. Armored Core 1. Armored Core 2 was the PlayStation 2 variant, with a sequel for number 3. And on the next-gen systems, number 4 and 4 Answer came out. Xbox and PS3. And now recently, they've released the Armored Core 5, which is the most recent iteration of the series. A very good concept, but we'll get into that later. The series itself is a mech-based combat game. Big suits like this dude, the White Glint, engage each other in close and long-range combat using a variety of weapons, such as machine guns, rocket launchers, missile launchers, laser blades. Even includes weapons, like giant pneumatic pistons that can just punch straight through a victim. The game series is well known for its grandiose intros and well-designed visuals. And the action is fast, fluid. The earlier games were slower and more tactical. You piloted these big, plodding mechas that were not fast, but they were heavily armored and well-armed and could do lots of damage. On the other hand, the more recent games, at least number 4 and 4 Answer, were much faster, much more intense, and were more based around close, high-speed maneuvers and combat attacks, where you got in and just really went to town on the bad guys. Now, granted, the game here, or at least the cinematic you're seeing here, is a bit of an exaggeration. The series has in no way allowed you that level of movement or freedom to grab a helicopter out of the air. Most you can do is shoot them down or hit them with rockets, but you get the idea. But with that all said, let's start at the beginning with the story, or how the stories normally work in these series, and go back to the start. In the early games, it was mostly about a number of different ideas, such as you being a mercenary working for different groups, or acting as a sort of heavily armed enforcer for a government, whatever the case may be. As the series progressed, it began to become a little bit more esoteric. It went from being, mercenary work and all that stuff, fighting against the well-known protagonist Nineball, and all other kinds of stuff, to being on Mars, to now being on a deserted, devastated Earth where, the world's so polluted no one can live on it, essentially. Bonk. Now, the games themselves had a variety of different stories and ideas behind them. And the Gen 1 series usually dealt with you and a character known as Nineball, which turned out to be a renegade AI who was sort of going crazy. Gee, how often does that happen in science fiction? My god. The later series had you going to Mars as a soldier, had you fighting for a computer-controlled society, helping that society go back to the surface, etc., etc., etc. Each series was a continuation, but a vastly expanded series, where often the games took place many, many years after each other. So it was often not uncommon for a story from one game to continue some 200 years after its previous, such as the case with number 4 and 4 Answer, They take place almost immediately after each other.
Mission complete.
Now, gameplay. The series' gameplay, as you've no doubt noticed from the video, is all about big machines shooting and killing each other. No human blood, no, lost limbs, just big robots blowing apart each other.
Commence mission.
Now, the earlier games, as I made mention earlier, were slow, plodding, very, very much built around tactics and the use of heavy weapons. You had the ability to boost and dash, but it was nothing compared to the later series. For example, here you see me using a gigantic rocket booster to try and run up to a giant battleship that's trying to blow me out of the sky with heavy weapons. And you'll notice I'm going at ridiculously fast speed. So this is something that the PlayStation 1 or 2 versions could never accomplish because of their limited rendering capacity. And as you'll no doubt notice, I wound up making a mistake in this run, and I take a round straight to the face and go down to the bottom. Now, the game is great. Even the early games were fun, and they were enjoyable, and they had great combat. But they were also exceedingly difficult, especially the earlier games in the series. Partially because the control schemes were somewhat spotty. I guess that'd be a nice way of saying it. But also because the game's difficulty was never really balanced well. They were so hung up on trying to get the game to play and look good that at times they forgot that one dude against an entire army isn't fair if the dude's, piloting a piece of crap. And in the early games, you were often equipped with the lowest, weakest, most ineffective machine you could get your hands on, and you had to start from there and go up. And you never earned enough money or equipment to really make that big of a difference, and it usually wound up putting you in dire straits. Now, that being said, even the early games are still a blast to play, and when you get good at them or know the tricks to cheating them, you can have a lot of fun with them, especially with the bigger, more powerful battle units. But if you're looking for a good balance between an enjoyable game and a challenging game, then I recommend 4 and 4 Answer as the best options in that regard, because they were the best mix between challenging game and fun gameplay. Especially 4 Answer because of how fast and intense it was. Missed me. Now that big thing is a armed battleship, and they only appear in the 4th series. Well, no. Versions of them do appear in the earlier series, but nothing quite as impressive as this. That being said, the game is a fun, enjoyable romp, and I had a great time with all of them. I just feel that 4 and number 4 Answer are probably the best. You can see that thing sinking. Now, moving on to the graphics and design, which you've no doubt noticed are, from the version I'm showing you here, are very good. This is the 4 Answer series. Its graphics are probably some of the best the series ever had. And I would actually say that graphically it actually stands up against 5 very well, but the series has always had good graphics for the technology it was using at the time. For example, the PlayStation 1 and 2 era did very well in making very good use of the hardware they had. The robot designs were very well done, but they were built around the concept of being blocky, heavy tanks rather than being, fast, nimble assault craft. As the series went on, they got more and more refined and well developed, and began to show more and more diversity in the series. A good example is the 3 and its subsequent spin-offs had many interesting design options and choices. Now, it should be noted, and I should have brought this up earlier, but the series is not just 1, 2, 3, 4 Answer. The series has dozens and dozens of games because you have re-releases, you have the absolutely, fantastic series, itself, but then there's also a bunch of expansions and sub-games. For example, the original game had Master of Arena, or no, it was Project Phantasma. The second game had a couple of spin-offs. The third game had a bunch of spin-offs. In fact, I think the second and third just had like boatloads of spin-offs. I don't remember the exact details. But there's plenty of choices in terms of the different games you can try. The fourth game and For Answer were the only two released for the Xbox and Xbox 360 and PlayStation that were from the Armored Core 4 genre, or series if you will, before they released 5. And 5 is its only released software, there's no expansions for it yet. And if there are going to be, they'll probably be DLC because it is an online-based game. Now, when you play any of these games, you'll notice that, especially with the more recent ones, the machines themselves are beautiful. The actual design of the landscapes are fairly simple because they spend so much focus on the machines and the mechs and the environments, the skybox and everything, but they don't spend a lot of time with cityscape or jungle or anything like that. They're very simplistic, even on the earlier games. Still, the games are very crisp and very clean and very nice to watch. Now, moving on to sound and music. If there's one thing that this series does right, it's its sound effects. Especially in the later series. Gunshots sound powerful, or the machine guns have that chittery sound effect that you would expect from a machine gun. Rocket explosions have nice pops and great bass on the bigger guns. The games themselves do very good work with what they have. The sound effects are good. The voice acting is passable. It got much better later on in the series, but it's still not up to the best. The music is appropriate, if unmemorable. You're dealing with a series that, for all intents and purposes, is really all about getting right down to the nitty-gritty of you versus the world, and just, if it moves, blow it up. If it doesn't move, blow it up anyway. Now, the design on the game's sound is, there's no glitches or bugs. It all flows very naturally. There's no sound artifacts or anything. And especially with a good surround sound system, it works beautifully. The sound of the bass isn't particularly impressive if you've got a surround sound. You'll feel that in your feet, baby. Now, overall, I think the series does very well for what it's attempting to accomplish. I do not, however, feel that the sound department is its best strength. It has great audio for what it does, but it's not anything that's gonna, win awards, as it were. This isn't gonna be a Grammy winner or nothing like that. It's still fun and enjoyable series and great audio to back it up. It doesn't have the best music, but the music is appropriate for its themes and its backgrounds, and works well to flow with the action without being intrusive. Overall, sounds worth it, and I wouldn't suggest turning it off. But you may want to try your own music now and then just to add a little bit of variety. Now, the features in the series history. On the early PlayStation 1 and 2 era, the game was mostly a one-player, if sometimes a two-player game with limited multiplayer options. On the later series, it actually expanded into online play, co-op play, and got really good down the line with later on. Now, the image in front of you is Nineball, who is one of the series' main protagonists in the PlayStation days. He has not been seen since, as a matter of record. Now, getting started with Armored Core 2 and 3, the series really sort of began to take off in terms of its design and ideals. It really sort of began to look at the corporate structure, the use of soldiers as tools for war and atrocities. The idea that, you know, corporations would use troops for anything and anything. Armored Core 4 and Forancer both followed the series mainstay, but actually expanded it by giving your machine unbelievable amounts of mobility. As you can see in this, I can float, I can dodge. If you're playing certain models like the White Glint, you can practically fly. And the White Glint is now the poster boy for the series in a lot of people's eyes. It's dynamic, it's a very cool looking piece of machinery. Its pilot has probably more story to him than almost anyone else. The one thing the series does that is strange is that it doesn't actually give the protagonist, no matter what game you play, the protagonist really has no identity. It's a blank slate scenario. And this works for the game, because it allows you to put your own personality and make your own decisions and go with your own instincts in it, rather than having the story decided for you. All the games in the series often have branching paths or different endings, and the game often will have different paths for you to take depending on who you play as, or what side you go with when you're choosing your allies. Now, as I said before, the series lives and dies on its mech designs, and they're beautiful. So it's one of the best things for sci-fi and robo-heads. You're gonna love the work, baby. Now, wrapping this up with the series' future. As of now, Armored Core 5 has been released and is the most recent game in the series. Coming up here, you'll see some video of it. Armored Core is, hands down, one of my favorite series, but 5 did not sit well with me.
Here's the route to the rendezvous point.
It feels as though it's a step back, in my opinion. It had a lot of good ideas, online compatibility, massive amounts of co-op, great visual style, and a lot of really good cityscape work, but the reduction in mobility felt like a step back for me. The game's much more focused about tactical application, unit cohesion, working as a team and fighting as one. That's all great for the online component, but I still prefer the solo experience. As my name implies, I'm the solo gamer. It's not to say that I didn't enjoy it when I played it and that I haven't had fun with it, but I still feel that at the end of the day, and admittedly this is just my opinion, I still feel at the end of the day the game didn't meet my expectations or give me the thrill that I had with Forancer. It just felt like the game was slower, clunkier, and that the characters themselves, while more interesting, you know, it felt like there was just too much of a shift here, as if all that I'd done in the previous games now no longer applied because they kept changing it. Well, this has been true of other games in the series. The jarring shift in this one was just too much for me to take, I guess. I don't think that's a bad game. In fact, I think it's an exceedingly good game if you're into the online multiplayer. It's a beautiful, well-designed multiplayer experience and a lot of fun to play, but it is not my style. Either way, if you haven't played the Armored Core series, I highly recommend it. If you're up to date with the newer systems, Armored Core 4, Forancer, and 5 are all available, and you can get the first two, 4 and Forancer, at exceedingly good discounts online, or at your local game store in most cases. 5 is new, but shouldn't be hard to get a copy of, and you probably can find it at sales. For the earlier games, it all depends on what systems you have, but seek them out, they're worth it. This is Matt Cat, the Solo Gamer, signing off.